Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Summer of Peace. I'm Philip Helmick. I serve as a Global Peace Ambassador with the Shift Network, and it's just really a delight. This summer series is such a delight, with everything that's going on in the world with COVID-19, the racial protests giving rise to, centuries of injustice. There's just so much up in the air right now. It's just nice to be able to have a forum for us to come together as a community and look at different ways that people are practically approaching peace. And this session here is one that I've just been really looking forward to. It's with dear friends of ours, our friends at Pathways for Peace. And so session is going to be Ending Racism to Optimize Human Potential with Avon Mattison, Rich Shealey, and Gabriel. And again, this session is going to be different than other ones. It's coordinated by Pathways for Peace. And what I'll be doing is introducing the three folks, our three guests, and then Tez will go ahead and facilitate the call. And like other sessions, you're invited to place comments or questions in the Facebook comment section. And when there's an opportunity, we can look at some of those, but also just so you have a dialogue with the other friends in the Shift Network community. So let me introduce our three guests. Avon Mattison. Oh my gosh, she is a dear, dear friend, a beautiful bright light in the peace building world. Avon is a peace building and inter-organizational consultant, advisor, and mentor with over four decades of experience. And Avon works with innovative leaders, groups, and organizations on the front line, building cultures of peace intergenerationally and interculturally for future generations. She's the co-founder and president of Pathways to Peace, an international peace-building education and consulting organization. There's much more that we can say about Avon, including that she was a U.S. Foreign Service diplomat for 3 years serving in the European community. Given we have three guests, I'm going to keep these brief. Rich Shealey is founder and chief servant of the Optimal Human Global Community, a community of evolved and evolving humans of all ethnicities who are committed to doing their part to end racism as an integral part of the human experience. Also, he is creator of Heart Transformed, Ending Racism, a learning system that helps people end their journey with racism, awaken to the fullness of their humanity, and live consciously beyond the constraints of race, racism, and white supremacy. And again, there's much more we could say here about Rich too. And then Tez Gabriel is the executive director of Pathways to Peace, a UN peace messenger organization, and in consultation with ECOSOC that works in partnership with peace builders locally and globally to build a culture of peace. Tez is the owner and senior consultant for Gabriel Associates. For almost 30 years, Tez has worked with a mission-based organization to create relevant, viable, sustainable, peaceful workplace environments that affect real change in our world. And likewise, there's much more to say about Tez here. And so Tez and Avon and Rich, I just want to welcome you and thank you for being part of the Summer of Peace. And Tez, let me turn this over to you.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Philip. We are just honored and delighted to be here. And of course, we have engaged with Summer of Peace for many years now. So we couldn't be more delighted to be guests today. So we're going to kick off our time with our president and CEO, Avon Mattison, and she is also the co-founder of Pathways to Peace. So Avon?
Thank you, Tez. I'm just one of co-stewards. I'll put it that way. Welcome, everyone. Pathways to Peace is honored to host today's important conversation on this crucial issue of racial injustice, which is pervaded and must end through awareness and through wise and effective concerted action at all levels. This moment in history is yet another wake-up call. Thank you, Rich, for your long commitment and courage to end racial injustice. And over the past 40 years, Pathways to Peace has been engaged in peace through justice as one of the pathways through our work and with the United Nations and with organizations locally and globally, and also with courageous peace leaders throughout the world, people like Philip and so many others. It's a privilege for all of us to hear his wisdom, Philip Rich's wisdom, as we engage in dialogue with him today. Thank you. And now I turn to the heartful Tezikiah to facilitate the dialogue today. Dear Tezikiah.
You're so wonderful. And so thank you, Avon. Yes, we are so happy to say that Rich is a Pathways to Peace partner. He is a friend and colleague. And I always say that Rich is one of the best thinkers in the world today. So I will be getting Rich to kind of share some of that wisdom that he carries around with him as we really attempt to address this really relevant and compelling issue of ending racism. As Philip said, the title of our time today is Ending Racism to Optimize Human Potential. And so you'll find that Rich is not only a sage, and I tell him he's a prophet, but he also is gives us a solution that provides a pathway to unity and oneness. So Rich, thank you so much for being willing to have this dialogue with us today.
Thank you so much, Tez. I'm really happy to be here and look forward to sharing.
Perfect. So I think we're going to just go ahead and plunge into some questions, if you're okay with that, Rich.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So I begin these conversations with you, Rich, with this same question. But as we know, the dialogue is changing as majority populations around the world appear to be waking up to the injustice of racism. So we know, of course, that racism is a lived experience for you and so many others. And also that ending racism is really at the heart of your work. So in this changing dialogue and in this particular moment in time, what would you like to say or add to the current dialogue?
First, I would like to say the consciousness that captures me in this moment is the consciousness of peace, the promise of peace that is lifted up as we look across the world and see all of the things that are happening with regard to the possibility of ending racism. And the promise of peace is something that I hold dear in my heart, that the peace that is possible for all humans. And
Yeah.
the thing about racism that is so devastating to humanity is that it is a species level problem. It is not just a problem for America. It's not just a problem for Europe, but all of the peoples across the earth are captured by this. And we want to really understand the complexity, the multi-level, the multi-dimensions of racism. It's a very, very difficult thing to do, and it will be an incredibly hard problem to solve. All that we see in the street that appears so promising, we want to be careful with that. We want to remember that we live in societies across the globe societies that are um, toxic feedback loops that are self-reinforcing with a great deal of elasticity, with the ability to stretch as far as needed to capture the energy of a given moment, like the moment that we're having now, the moment when so many people look like they're waking up and so many people are showing promising behavior and promising words. But we need to remember that this system has maintained its integrity for at least 350 years. And it has
Yes.
always used its elasticity to snap back to its guiding principles. And the guiding principles are not what people are likely to think they are. The guiding principles of this system, in my opinion, are first of all, income inequality. Secondly, the false hypothesis of race. Thirdly, the institution of racism. It always comes back to that, no matter how it looks on the surface. You know, we had a lot of exciting moments in the 60s, but those moments are over. We're now wondering how we're going to have an election. And if we just think back to the 15th Amendment, we shouldn't have a problem with elections if we would just follow the 15th Amendment. But because of the way this system um, absorbs absorbs the energies that come against it and is able to neutralize those energies over time. We want to be very, very careful about how we come at this. So I appreciate the moment. I love the moment. I I honor the consciousness of peace, but I also want to be very realistic with the experience that we've all had.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Rich. I so appreciate your words. And because, on one hand, we're hopeful
Yes,
that what we're seeing is going to lead to some more sustainable change. And yet, I know in our conversations, you implied it today, but in the conversations that we've had, that we must really, in the midst of that hope, be patient and to pursue the right practices as we remove that barrier to peace, right? Which
yes,
is racism.
yes.
So, thank you for that. And so, Rich, explore with us a little bit more about your work. Tell us a little bit more about your work and really the origins of your work.
Yes. My my work comes out of really who I am as a person. I was born an intuitive empath, and that's so very important because um, it is a kind of state of being that allowed me to operate sometimes outside of that self-reinforcing circle of toxicity of humanity. So by operating outside of that system, I was able to see the beauty of humanity, the beauty of all human beings from everywhere. And from the time I was a little boy, I always had an appreciation for all human beings and all different groups of people. And I always wondered about, why were people as they were, and I always wanted to learn about them. And out of that, I progressed over time to a very deep study of racism and the way in which it separated people and what was the effect of that separation. Um, and that's really where I discovered um, the true possibility of humanity, the idea that we are um, people of energy beings, rather than simply limited to being physical beings. And most people, when they conceptualize themselves, they think of themselves as a physical being only. But what is becoming more and more known, and part of it scientifically, there's a lot of more scientific work to be done. But we could say that about 15%, maybe 12.5%, 12.5% is physical, and the remainder is energy. So 87.5% energy. So, and within that energy is the possibility of ending racism. But we have to learn how to make the shift from being constrained and perceiving ourselves as only that 12.5% human to 100%, which means that we would look at not only our physical biological being, but also look at our energetic being. And there's a great deal of detail in that. And it's important to understand that this is one being. It's not putting two pieces together. It's already one. And we are thereby linked together. And the baseline of our humanity is not our biology. The baseline of our humanity is our energy. And we all share in that, and we're all connected through that.
Wow. Of course. Thank you so much for that. That's where true hope lies, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
we are connected energetically.
We're connected now. We're connected now. It's not,
yes.
It's not that we have to wait to be connected.
No.
It's just we have to bring it into our awareness and introduce ourselves to ourselves.
Yes. That conscious awareness of our connection, our oneness, versus the belief in the myth of separation, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for that. So Rich, you've been doing this work for a long time, and you've brought that work to a lot of people. So I know you've witnessed change as a result of your work with folks. So tell us a little bit about your experience and what your thoughts are about what it takes for people to commit and change to end racism.
It's a very, very difficult process. When we talk about people awakening to the human that they truly are, that's difficult without even putting racism into the equation. But when you add racism, then it becomes extraordinarily difficult. And it's because of the way in which humans operate and function, the way in which their life flows from what they value. And most people think that their life flows from their conscious values, but usually it's their unconscious values that's driving their behavior. And racism is in all of those places, is in the conscious side, the unconscious side, and the energetic side. It is in all of those places. And so it has to be dislodged. The first step, once you help people understand the truth of racism, and most people really are clueless about the truth of racism, but once you help people understand the truth of racism, that positions them to be interested to know, okay, now that I know this truth and I know this has held me back, I know that this has contributed to health issues, has contributed to mental challenges, has contributed to problems in my society. Now that I know all of these things, okay, how can I begin the process of overcoming them? At that point, we can introduce them to the details of their humanity and begin to help them go through a process of awakening and being comfortable with awakening. And over time, and it's a different time for everybody. And this is something that basically my work is to prepare people to take charge of their own lives and to go through a series of elevations of their consciousness, revising of their values, and seeing their life from a perspective of oneness rather than from a perspective of separation and limitation. Because once you can see your life from a perspective of oneness, you can see your limitless possibilities. We are designed to be full expressions of all that the universe is. That's what we're designed as human beings to be vehicles of the universe, conscious of itself in its creativity, its beauty, and all of those things. That's what we're designed to be. But we have almost no awareness of that. And if we want to get to that, and we must get to that if we are to end racism and to enter into the possibilities of what and who we are and what we're intended to be. It's a very, very challenging and difficult process. It doesn't happen quickly. It is something that takes time and patience and discipline and heart.
Heart.
Yes.
Yes, heart.
Yes,
And I love that, you imply that helping people become conscious of racism, and that it's in their best interest, right?
Absolutely.
To actually end that racism.
It's not only in their best interest, but it's in the interest of their children and their children's children. Everybody's, the way social scientists have looked at this problem has created more problems within itself, because the social scientists study this problem and they focus on people who are so-called non-white. And that's a disservice to everybody, because everybody is diminished by this problem. Whenever human beings are placed in a position where they don't see the wholeness of who they are, and they don't see that the other is me, then everybody is diminished. And there's a perspective that you can create trauma in the life of another human being and escape that trauma yourself. Well, that's not true. When you inflict trauma on another human being, you are inflicting trauma on yourself. You may not perceive it, you may not feel it in the moment, but you are harming yourself. And this is what the learning in my system leads to. It's all about the oneness, the one human family, and how we can be optimal human beings, how we can select for ourselves values that compel us to move toward our greatness, and also compel us to participate in the greatness of others at the same time. Not one or the other, but the greatness of all. And that's what it's really all about. And that's what we seek to do. And that's where we will find the beauty of peace.
Just so beautiful. You kind of take us to our knees, Rich. So thank you. And tears. And it doesn't matter how many times I hear you, I still have that response. So thank you. The heart opens.
Yes.
So you just spoke about your learning systems. And I know that's a big part of your work with individuals and with groups. So can you tell us a little bit more about those learning systems?
The learning system um, has can be delivered as 7 90-minute webinars, or it can be delivered as a weekend workshop, 1.5 days, or I'm happy to work with people in private sessions or businesses for VIP days, because all of our communities need to have a better understanding of how to deal with this complex problem. And it's extraordinarily complex. One of the things I think is so important and is not clearly understood, um, the scientist Mazarin Banaji, who was behind the implicit association test, which is the very famous test that helps people to see their unconscious bias. She wrote a book called Blind Spot. And in that book, she pointed out that a person who thought of themselves as egalitarian on the conscious level could be a equally rabid racist on the unconscious level. So you have these two dynamics existing within the same human at the same time without awareness of what is happening. And that is one of the things that we want to be very, very thoughtful about as we go through this process of awakening and reaching for the fullness of our humanity. Because remaining with that 12.5%, it's almost impossible to solve the problem. You have got to get yourself into the fullness of what is possible for you in order to have a chance of being a whole person and achieving the things we want to achieve.
Thank you for that. So when you've worked with individuals, I know that you've witnessed change over time in your work with them. Can you talk a little bit or paint us a picture maybe of the kind of change you've seen, and what difference that makes for those individuals and maybe for others? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's I don't want to I don't want to claim for my work things that I don't know to be fully true.
Mm-hmm.
So
I honor that.
what I would say is that what I've seen is people make the commitment to take relationship to their lives differently, to open their lives to the possibility of what could happen with them, and to embrace the idea that there was more to them than just their physical body, that there was more to their humanity than their brain, that the and one of the great enjoyments of this work is to see a person understand that their heart is more than a blood pump. And when they can see that their heart is a portal to so many unlimited spiritual possibilities for them, that is a great joy for me, and that's what I'm looking for.
What a beautiful image of our hearts as a portal to all possibility.
Yeah.
That's just beautiful.
Yeah.
And so once people begin to see that, and you know, what have you perhaps witnessed about what has changed? And I'm thinking as people embrace that notion of their hearts being a portal to all possibility, that it's an evolving process. I might be wrong about that, but what are the possibilities, I would say, that can manifest once people have embraced that beautiful truth?
Let me use myself as an example in that case. In researching this work, I went through every imaginable possibility and looked at human beings from all different angles. And I looked at how a human being creates a self. And in looking at how a human being creates a self, I wanted to know where did racism enter in that process, and because I wanted to know in creating my learning system, I wanted to know what was the root and what was the point at which I should enter. And in that process, I learned that racism is pretty much imprinted on what we think of as the DNA stream of a human being before they're born. And I also learned that for a given lifetime, the first reality of the fetus is the unconscious of the mother. And so what that told me was that so-called white people didn't have to be taught to be racist. It was already in their being stream by the time they were born, and it was there before the time they were born. And because of the change that had already occurred in my being by that time, when I learned that new information, at that point I was compelled to forgive, because my heart was in a place that I could not hold that information within my consciousness without responding to it with my heart and the truth of my heart, which, well, here the other is me. The other is me. And I just could not hold that as a grudge. And that enriched my work. That enriched my work. That empowered my work. So it was very, very, that moment of authentic forgiveness. Or another thing to think about, you think about there's a lot of talk these days about the divine feminine. And I was working with a group of grandmothers, and I was teaching the learning system to a group of grandmothers. And we came to a point where we were talking about the abuse of women. And all of a sudden in that moment, I was able to experience the depth of the trauma that a woman feels in a moment of abuse from a woman's point of view, which was an engagement and an energetic resonance with the divine feminine within me. And I spoke the words of that consciousness in that class. And that's another thing that just is evidence of how this process works and how you evolve. So it's just it's a whole different thing that takes you outside of the circle of reinforcement of the status quo. That's so important and that we look for, and that's how we know we're making progress on what we're trying to do.
Thank you again. So, for all of us here and in our audience that are committed to ending racism, what does it take to sustain that deep level? Let's even put it in the context of your work, Rich, for those that you've worked with who have embraced that heart portal to possibility and have made that commitment to ending racism. What does it take to sustain that deep level commitment over time?
Very complex, very difficult question.
I know, coming towards the end of our time together too. You get to pass if you like.
Well, yesterday, as I continued my study, I was studying about the spiritual heart. And one of the ideas that was introduced was the idea is that the spiritual heart is not only the place of love and compassion and forgiveness, but also a place where we have to deal with hate. And that was hard for me to get a handle on because I'm unable to imagine myself embracing hate for any reason. I can't imagine that would be true. And in response to your question, I think it is when we commit ourselves to advancing as human beings, to embracing the fullness of our humanity, to embracing all that is in our energy and all that it promises. My greatest delight is to think that at some point I would be so aligned with the universe that I could express its creativity, its oneness, its love, its beauty in the same way that the universe does. And that's where my imagination goes. And I am committed enough to that I couldn't imagine anything less as being worthy of our time. And the idea of, my idea of humanity is that we are one family, that the other is me, that it's all about love and compassion and forgiveness and transparency. So I think that you have to, everyone has to find their own way to their path that takes them to that place, that takes them to the fullness of who they are and who they can become. And all of that is within them already. It's just an awakening and an embracing and an honoring. And when you can do that, you leave the other things behind, and the money, the position, the celebrity is less valued.
Yes, I so resonate with every word, Rich, and I know that's true for our audience members as well. And so, as we begin to close our time together, and I see in the chat box people want your contact information, and we have that, so that's good. But before we move there, Rich, any last words or anything that you think you'd like to tell us or would be important for us to know?
Um, I would like to return to peace.
Mm.
Imagine if we had a world of authentic peace rather than the world that we have. Imagine what that would be like. And it is so important to understand that we cannot have an authentic world of peace without learning to love each other authentically, to love each other without reservation, to love each other because we see ourselves in the other, and because we not only see ourselves in the other, but we receive the energetic that our greatness is magnified as we embrace the greatness of the other. And I believe that there is greatness in every human being. Mm-hmm. Too often it's unrealized, but there's greatness in every human being. But the visceral experience of peace that comes with that embracing of the other, the oneness that we have with each other, and the oneness that we have with all life. That's the peace that I want to honor today.
So deep, 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 deep bows to you, my friend. Thank you so much. And I'm sure our audience would like that information about how to contact you and what might be coming up. So let me bring that information up for folks. And so, so we're really excited, Rich and I. This is something we've talked about for a while. We're featuring, Pathways to Peace is featuring Rich with healing talks. And these are going to be compelling topics that will be at 12:30 Central Time. And they'll be at 10:30 Pacific Time, 1:30 Eastern Time, and there will be 30 minutes for 7 Mondays beginning July 13th. So we hope people will tune in. We'll be providing a Zoom link for that. And here is Rich's contact information. If you're interested in getting that Zoom and coming in. We imagine it's going to be 15 or 20 minutes of Rich sharing wisdom around that topic, and 10 or 15 minutes of audience dialogue. My email address is there as well, tez@pathwaystopeace.org. And so at this point, I'd love to turn it back to Philip for our closing, and just say thank you. We're really so honored to be here. Avon, myself, Rich, and the entire Pathways to Peace team thanks you, wants you to know that we know you are a pathway to peace. So thank you.
Yes, it's such a joy to have you here, and Rich, I just want to say I just love the deep wisdom that's flowing through you. From inside the mother's womb, we're being transmitted. Our unconscious biases, and just how deep all of this is, and then yet you're holding this vision of oneness, and at the same time navigating the realities of racism. Just really appreciate you and all you're doing, and Tez, the way that you held space, and Avon, my dear friend, you are just such a highly respected and honored peace builder, who's been doing this for decades and was one of the inspirations for the Minute of Silence, the International Day of Peace, and inspiration for so much more too. And I want to highlight the people who've been commenting here. We've had a number of comments. We've had Deborah Kremen, Mary Goff, yes, the promise of peace for all. Sunlit Tish, just so many people commenting here. It's just really beautiful to see the engagement. And so thank you. And Tez, any closing comments from you or Avon before we go?
No, we always leave our conversations with Rich more enlightened and more hopeful, more inspired. And really, it is the stuff that helps us keeping on with peace building. And so important in these times. So again, deep bow to Rich, and thank you to all of our audience that has been listening in from all of us at Pathways to Peace. Thank you.
Yeah, great. And so all the people who've joined us, thank you for being with us, and stay tuned for more of the Summer of Peace. We're posting at the top of the Facebook page the updated schedule. We have Devadian this evening at 5 o'clock, and that's going to be a dynamic one also. So wherever you are in the world, whether it's morning, afternoon, evening, or night, thank you so much for being with us, and we will see you on the next session. Right. Namaste.
Namaste.